Okay, just a quick one. Thank you. So just a quick one on what is Garze Marathi. Basically a platform designed to bring together the global Marathi community across the world. Essentially, one, it is to celebrate the success of people, of all the good things that they have done, but also most importantly, to create a strong professional network of Marathi people. It also allows for providing mentoring to achieve success or even give back to society to our roots. But why does it matter here and today? Essentially, all of us have transitioned from a place of familiarity and probably created a home away from home. So we know the value of a social support system and it's beyond measure. And as Michigan's population of Marathi professionals, students, and entrepreneurs increases, we know that there is definitely an established place for cultural setups. We've all enjoyed it, we've all benefited from it, we've all created these connections that we have here today. But however, I think there has been a felt need or an absence of an organized construct wherein you can discuss or even meet people on the basis of where you are at your career, ask these dynamic, intangible questions of, what is it that I could do in a certain situation, etc. Because essentially, it's also riding on the back of a rich cultural influence. So having said that, we are a scrappy but a really mighty team of a few professionals here who really thought that this was something that we'd like to give back and participate at the same time. So what happens here with this group is we would like to offer or be that bridge where you can access experienced professionals, opportunities for mentorship, guidance through the lens of empathy. Really, how do we look at our unique challenges? There are three pillars to Garze Marathi as such. There is the first one, which is career transformation. The second one is social entrepreneurship. And the third one is networking. What we are doing today, or why we are here today, is under the pillar of career transformation. I want to take you back a little bit to the spring of 2024 in March. We all got together as a small group under the career transformation workshop to understand the value of networking, to probably understand what are some of the insights in it. We are great when it comes to literature, when it comes to our own areas of excellence, but perhaps we need to open those doors and be a little more vulnerable, a little more open when it comes to just interacting as professionals. So when we had a feedback form and just surveyed as to what is it that people are looking for, when it comes to how this group or how this place can become a little more meaningful and relevant to our needs, four things came up, or four gaps really came up as people were talking about, which is the first one is communication skills, the second, executive presence or leadership, the third being negotiation skills, and the fourth being conflict management. In no particular order, but I guess these are all really rich subjects. And what will happen from here on as we get, more and more momentum is to be able to address some of these because they are their own thesis subjects in their own might. What we started was some workshop activity, but at the same time, to make sure this conversation is continued and the momentum continues at a certain pace, we've put together something called Hello Thursdays, which is basically a meetup that can happen virtually like today, or it can be at a place where a lot of, a bunch of us can get together. The idea is to continue having conversations, to share, to probably mentor, and really make sure that we are benefiting from this symbiotic relationship. Having said that, today is Thursday. I'm going to stop sharing this. And we are very much here on a Hello Thursday. The topic is negotiation skills. And while this is considered as a complex competency, we have our panelists here today who are going to talk about how do they deal with this, what is the arc of negotiation, why is it really important, and so on. So essentially, I will say that this is a learned skill that all of us have at some point in time, either in our professional setups or in our personal lives, negotiate. I think we negotiate pretty much daily. So what we want to do now from here on, the next 45 to 50 minutes, is really get into some of the basic questions and try and cull some insights as to what negotiation skills are. I will say, as just a housekeeping rule, please use a chat as your channel to share questions, doubts, and we will continue to address them. We have Saket, who has gladly volunteered to do this for us. And without further ado, I think I will go straight into introductions of our panelists. And I'm going to request each of you, starting with Satish Dongre, to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what about you really looks at negotiation and how this topic is meaningful to you. So over to you, Satish.
Thank you very much. So, and thanks for everyone joining us. I'm sorry. So thanks for joining this group today, everyone. I really appreciate your time. My name is Satish Dongre. Been working for last now about 40 years, and 24 years out of that here in Michigan. So I work for LTI Mindtree, which is an IT services company in top 5 service provider companies from India by market cap. So quite a large company. All of you may have heard about Larsen and Toubro itself, but we are one of the group companies from L&T Group called LTI Mindtree. So we are into software services business, and negotiation, as Mugdha mentioned, is very important aspect in all our daily lives as well as our work lives. So by definition, negotiation, it's a meeting which is aimed at reaching an agreement. Although some of the business negotiation is not just a meeting. In fact, in my opinion, none of the negotiation meeting is really that meeting where you decide. But it starts way earlier, and it's a process. It's not just a point in itself where you finalize something or reach an agreement. Sometimes it takes months, sometimes even a couple of years. I mean, I know one of the RFPs that I was participating, it went over 13 months. Okay, so, and the negotiation, in my opinion, it started from the day we were even invited to that RFP, right? Because then that means that customer is really interested in at least having you as one of their options. And that means there is an interest. And obviously we are interested because we wanted to sell our services. So obviously both the parties have their own interest in dealing with each other and reaching an agreement. And that's why, how do you go about doing that, right? So it's fundamentally my opinion. And again, don't take this as final word because I'm only one small part of our entire company. And I'm sure there are so many of you who would have done this almost every day. So just going to share my experience, what I saw and what I feel important based on my own experience. So it's people.
So Satish, just for a minute, I wanted us to just introduce ourselves and then we'll get into the questions.
Then we'll
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes, absolutely. No problem. Let's say. So I'll move this now to Sanjay Karve to just introduce yourself, your industry background, and briefly as we then speak to the rest of the panelists. Thank you, Satish.
So thanks, Mugdha, for that introduction. Thank you, everybody, for joining this. And hopefully it will be interactive because I think we have a lot to learn from each other. None of us knows everything. So I'm part of, I'm with Tata Consultancy Services now for almost 20 years, part of the Tata Group for 30 years or so. A competition here in some ways to what Satish is trying to do in the market. So that's another element of negotiation also, which we see. I have also spent time in the shop floor, so I have some perspective from a different set of individuals that you come across, and also manage teams. So hopefully we'll be able to bring something based on my experience of 30 years. As we keep saying, every day is a negotiation. So there's nothing unique in that sense, but at the same time, the experience teaches you things. So very happy to be on the call. Great to have some sharing around here. Back to you, Mugdha.
Thank you. Let's move to Ajit Kulkarni.
Hello, namaskar. Good evening. Ajit Kulkarni. I'm in Michigan for about 26 years or so, and being part of the transportation industry for about 30 years. Spent first couple years in India, and then almost last 26 odd years I've been in Michigan in transportation industry. Spent most of my time at a tier 1 automotive, type of a framework. Automotive, just kind of, being my passion. So far, I've continued there. Have spent some roles in engineering, program management, and currently sales, and saw my share of negotiating, with team members internally, customers, management, everybody in the professional network. So hope to share my thoughts, from that perspective. And I think, as Satish and Sanjay rightly said, really looking to hear for others' insights too. We welcome all the questions or even thoughts from folks that are on the call, so that we get to learn from you. We get to learn from your perspectives or your questions. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Ajit. And last but most importantly, Manali Phatak, a dear friend, and I'm so glad you're here on the call.
Thank you, Magda. Namaskar, everybody. I'm Manali Phatak. I'm a senior manager at Adient Inc. It's one of the largest car seat manufacturers worldwide. We used to be part of Johnson Controls, but then became our own company a few years ago. So almost 1 in every 3 car seats that you see will be an Adient car seat. It's a pretty big company. I have over 25 years of experience, having worked with in India, USA, and some time in the United Kingdoms as well. And I grew up in Indore, Madhya Pradesh in India. When Mugdha contacted me about this panel, I was like, what do I have to share? But then I realized that through your experiences, you always build up something, and you have something that you can share with others as well as learn from others. So that's why I'm here. Thank you to Garze Marathi for having me on the panel.
Awesome. Thank you so much, all of you. What I would like to do is start straight jumping into the questions. The first one is for you, Satish. As you talked about your experience, which spans, sales and consulting, I wanted to understand from you, really in this context, what is negotiation and why should we focus on this skill?
Yeah, Ruturaj, do you have any question? I saw you raise your hand. Okay, maybe.
No, Satish, because of the introductions, I was just clapping emoji memo par lota. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, so again, I'll just take back negotiation all about the process with the people and about the topic, right? And in my experience, so I've worked a few years in India and now here. And while in India, I used to travel and visit Asia Pacific as well as sometimes in Europe as part of the sales team. And that's why I'd seen many people. I think by and large they are similar, but there are very specific nuances of the region, or you can say country. जसं आपण म्हणतो मुंबईतले आणि पुण्यातले निगोसिएशनमध्ये फरक आहे, तर तसा इथे न्यूयॉर्कमध्ये आणि मिडवेस्टमध्ये सुद्धा आहे. सो पीपल आर डिफरंट बेस्ड ऑन देअर कल्चर, द लोकल लिंगो आणि बऱ्याच गोष्टी अवलंबून असतात. सो वन हॅज टू अंडरस्टँड ऑल ऑफ दॅट while you are getting into a negotiation meeting or getting in any relationship. And the better you understand the individuals, empathy plays a big role, in my opinion, that you must look at a problem from the other's side of view, right? Only then you know why they are doing to begin with. So if it is a project being outsourced or any solution that they want you to build, then why are they doing this? What is the whole purpose? आणि मग त्यांचे what all their expectations are, because you are not the only supplier in the market, right? They will have many options, and then you will have to convince them why it is only you that is really offering differentiated solution. So unless you are able to convince them, and it may not be just one, so it may be different departments trying to put together RFP document where individual needs may be different than the corporation need, but everybody has to be made happy at the end of the day if they want you to select you. So that's why it is very important to study the customer side or the other side, let me say, not client and service provider, but both sides have an interest in reaching an agreement, and therefore they need to study each other. Lot more for a seller, because he has to pitch the ball every time, right? And then it's up to customer how he plays. And even customer has to have a lot more understanding of the industry, of the solution, technology. Now these days, all of us know that most of the information is on the web, right? Be it through social media channel, LinkedIn. So before you and I go for a meeting, I do a lot of study on the client side, maybe based on their website, people who are participating in the meeting, check them out, sometimes Facebook, Instagram, what have you, right? There are so many channels and everybody has access to that. So it's a fair game. It's not that I have some distinguished advantage or over others. So everybody has the same tools, I guess. But it's very important to understand all of these tools, empathy for the other side, to understand their point of view or their side of the view before you even start working with the client. So that has been my experience. So different people, different regions, cultures, they also play a very important role in all of this. I mean, Midwest, I'll talk about, we live here. So it takes a while for you to build relationships. But once you build those, I think they go for long haul. And even if there are some challenges, some shortcomings, I think they are fairly, good in forgiving in a way, I will say. But they will work with you, and then it's going to be a win-win. So ultimately, in negotiation, once again, at the end, both parties need to win. Some companies have this as one of their principles. I mean, I know my daughter works for Mars. So Mars, they call it a principle of mutuality. That means whatever business you do, you must find, and this is even they follow internally. She was telling me several examples. So I just wanted to share that it has to be kept in mind that the other person or other party also has to benefit. It's not just me versus them, win versus loss. It has to be win-win.
Fantastic. I think that's such an important point that you bring up. It's that it's about both the parties. Thank you, Satish. I wanted to bring in Ajit here and really understand from you, as you have deep expertise from the sales perspective when it comes to automotive. Can you share with the audience, about where you have needed to really flex this negotiation skill muscle and what has been your experience?
Oh, thank you. So first of all, I mean, Satish, thank you for your perspective. I mean, wholeheartedly agree with you. Same actually, you would say thought process works, manufacturing. It's no different, right? You are providing, something, to the customer. And then when you look at negotiations there, I mean, it spans on multiple aspects, whether it is warranty. You are negotiating warranty of the parts we are providing. You are negotiating the intellectual property, who owns the intellectual property, right? So these are elements that go above and beyond standard pricing that we would work through, that we might construe as negotiation. How is basically shipment of parts going to work? How is quality aspect going to work, for example? This is what you will deal with the customer. But then there is negotiations internally. When you negotiate for resources that you are looking for to work on your project, when you are negotiating with your management or your colleagues, because you want to basically propose something that you want to have, and that there's a negotiation there too, because you want to have whatever you are working on prioritized compared to something else, and then you have to basically explain or basically justify why that is the case. So negotiation, in my view, I mean, plays a significant role every day, all in all. And I mean, I have had, just fortunately, in the last several years, experience negotiating warranty framework with several customers. I've had to negotiate beyond pricing, what should a multi-year contract looks like. And like Satish pointed out, really what you're looking for is a win-win scenario there. You really want to get to a point where the other side feels like they are accomplishing something. If we don't get them the feeling that they are accomplishing something, then there will be resistance from their side, and that's just that wouldn't work. The other part, really, I mean, keeping in mind that while you are negotiating here, at the end of the day, that is a business, but beyond that, relationship matters. So when we keep that part in mind, that really works in the long haul. And you are able to get that confidence from the other party, and you're able to maintain your business relationship ongoing for many years. That's been my personal experience, being part of Tenneco now for about 20 years now, and that's been my experience.
That's wonderful. I think these are some really important points as you speak about, which is relationships, which is negotiations get across a whole spectrum, and it's not just one thing that you focus on. Thank you, Ajit. I want to move to Manali and bring her in and really ask her two questions. One is really because you talked about Johnson Control and then now forming a new company in altogether, there must have been an organizational change as much as a team change. Where do you, or what are the areas do you usually find yourself in the negotiator's seat? That's question one. And the second is, given the differences, the natural differences of the gender, there are ways in which we have different negotiation styles. If you could touch upon that and share some examples, if possible, on how do you see it differently and what is your managing negotiation style?
So I'm in the software development project management world. I'm not really going to go a whole lot into the Johnson Controls Adient split because that'll take its own 2 hours. But in general, my teams interface with both our internal customers and internal IT teams. We deliver and deploy software. So when we think of negotiations, the previous panelists pointed out different areas. But in my area, one tends to think maybe negotiations are mostly about cost, but they apply to a lot of things. It can be scope negotiations. So what's the requirements that we're going to include in the solution? Schedule negotiation, right? Everybody wants everything soon as possible, but that's not always possible. Quality, and all of these, of course, impact cost. You'll find a lot of common underlying themes from what I'm hearing. And I will just expand on my experience, right? So from my perspective, some of the work we do is developing key strategic initiatives, which are groundbreaking and transformational in nature. For such initiatives, of course, they have a lot of change. So again, it is extremely critical to have empathy and to understand the other person's perspective. If you don't know what makes a person tick, their needs, you can never convince them to make a change. Change, of course, is hard, and we need to anticipate resistance. It is particularly important to share the full vision. You need to explain what is in it for you. You need to draw out fears and listen very carefully because you get cues from what they're telling you, and then you know how to respond to them. Another thing is you must communicate and over communicate, even if it is a very awkward or tense situation. I personally would not tend to do that, but that's something that has been a learning experience for me, that even if it's a very tense situation, you'll always come out better after that communication than before. One important aspect that was raised earlier is the regional nuances. You need to know how the various cultures operate. And a good framework for this was developed by the Dutch social psychologist Geert Hofstede. So he described national cultures along 6 dimensions: individualism, power distance, uncertainty avoidance, masculinity, long-term orientation, and indulgence versus restraint. So that makes some pretty good reading. If you get a chance, do follow up on that. From my experience, Western cultures are much more vocal. Other countries like Mexico, even India, we like to say yes, but that does not necessarily mean that they completely understand or agree with what you're saying. And in other countries, East Asia, for example, it is ridiculously hard to get people to speak up in a public forum. Some people need small talk, some people only open up face to face. And with today's online digital world, this is an especially important dynamic to understand. One of our very large initiatives included a global deployment of a software product. And our biggest challenge was getting our Asia teams to open up. What worked was traveling to Asia personally, but of course, this is not always possible due to budget constraints. But it also helps to have prep calls before bigger meetings in smaller groups so that you are aligned before that bigger meeting. And we also used video calls so it is easier to understand expressions and body language. Again, negotiations apply everywhere, but this was just a small example. Back to you, Mukta.
This is awesome. I think it was a rich piece of information about, not just culture, but just the way people work, through just how they are, the mindsets or backgrounds, or, even the situations that they are in. This is fantastic.
You asked me another question, Magda, so let me follow up on that, if that's okay. Yeah. So you asked about the gender and how it has how it's different being from the feminine gender, right? And I've been asked that question often, how being a woman has impacted my career. For example, in our Adient COE executive meeting team, I'm the only woman. This has never really slowed me down or hindered me, but I probably apply some of the softer skills more successfully. I personally believe in establishing trust. My style is very collaborative. So there's give and take in every negotiation, as was just discussed, but you need to know what your own bottom line is. So, for example, we had a situation with a new C-suite executive we had. New room, sweep clean, and this one was a very tough room. The exec wanted to completely replace our existing applications, and we're talking about multi-million, multi-year ERP implementations. So I had to build up trust with this exec, show my expertise in the area, explain the process and how it could meet their vision. And I was successfully able to negotiate a much smaller change rather than this complete tear up that was initially proposed. I blame this exec for quite a few of my gray hairs, but I think I tend to leave the gender out of it, but maybe use the softer skills more successfully. Back to you.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. I think this will go a long way in just everyone who's listening to it, from both sides, because I think it's really about the best way in we apply an approach. So thank you. And the examples that you provided were also very, very, helps us understand that so much better. I wanted to see if Satish and Sanjay, if you wanted to come in and, share some of your examples and experiences as you've both traversed the world, I think.
Sure. One thing I wanted to highlight here, I think we have all touched on it. Maybe one way to call it is the hardware and software of the negotiation. We talked about scope, contracts, price, schedules. But we should not forget that on the other side of the table is a person. And that is where some of the keywords that came out, right? Emotions. One important word was fears. The other guy is trying to get something, but they're also afraid of losing something. And if you know that, then you can actually address it. And this is extremely true when you're talking of supplier-customer relationships. It's extremely true when you're looking at outsourcing. If I'm going to outsource, what happens to me is a very real fear in people's minds. And I think that's where the personal element, it came through all the threads that Manali, Ajit, Satish mentioned. I just wanted to bring it out that at the end of the day, we're not negotiating with a GM or a TCS or IBM. We are negotiating with an individual who's going to take your case back to his superiors. And there may be 1, 2, 3 individuals, but you always got to find the person who's really going to make the deal, the influencer, right? In all our, we always ask the question, who's the decision maker? But never forget, there are many influencers who can actually derail the whole thing. And this is true, whether you talk of a contract in a business sense, you talk about you're trying to do something in your home. I mean, you may want something, your wife or your spouse is a different kind of influencer in the whole game, right? So I just wanted to highlight that very much. Cultural, again, resonated very well. We talked about, I forgot the exact word you used, Manali, but when I was in Japan, we were customer was Japanese. They were being basically the thing was led by budget holders who was a Chinese sitting out of Singapore. I was the lone Indian in that mix. Not lone, actually, coincidentally, we had a lady from Pune settled in Japan who was also part of the team. So interesting. But towards the end, when it came to decision points, I came to realize that the Chinese leadership was kind of pushing out anything the Japanese had to say. And it took them a long time before that CEO finally stood up and said, hey, if that's where we are going, why did we do all this? Those kind of issues. So this is definitely a cultural aspect. You go look at people in Germany, you will find them very, very different from somebody in the US. In the US also, you'll often be told that, look, I don't agree with what you're doing. So that's being blunt. There are other cultures where you're not being told. So again, it boils down to me to individuals. At the end of the day, you're 2 persons or 3 persons or a small group of people talking to each other and trying to bring a win-win-win situation. But what win means for me, what win means for the other individual, that's the key to a negotiation, in my mind.
Absolutely. One more important factor is the patience. Like I said, and it happens in many businesses. It's not just a one meeting negotiation, but I remember just to give an example, it went on for 13 months and so much of, back and forth, so much of testing out or validating whatever the understanding customer had, we had, and one has to keep a lot of patience. Another thing is finding the real customer. Who is the customer here, right?
Right.
It's very confusing sometimes, and you end up trying to convince wrong individual or a wrong role, which may or may not be even a decision maker or a customer. But because he speaks more in the meeting, you tend to, give attention and probably waste a lot of your time in trying to convince him, and which will have no impact on the bottom line or the final result. Okay, so it's very important to find out where not to waste time, because actually those are the people who derail the whole conversation for no good reason, right? So after you know who is the real customer and who is the decision maker, who has the authority to write a check, then you also need to have 1 or 2 influencers who may be able to work on his mind. And like Sanjay said, that these are people. Ultimately, we are dealing with people, not machines, or even in the digital world. At least until now, we have seen people making decisions. In future, God knows what will happen, but at least so far, you'll have to work with their own individual perceptions, their own individual maybe needs and wants, and make sure that you are well aligned. And only then you can make a good win. And when I say good win, it's win-win both sides, obviously. And that's why one has to take a lot of efforts and still keep a lot more patience. Right? Don't give up, because many times, oh, take it or leave it. Oh man, this is done. Yeah, but it's give your best and final offer. That's the standard terminology used by purchasing, right? You give your best and final offer and that's it. Then take it or leave it, right? But it's not like that. We have seen many times we call it BAFO, best and final offer, BAFO, but it's never a BAFO. They know that, and so we know that as well. But the idea there is that at least you know that, yes, we have reached till BAFO. Okay, so it's maybe last couple of steps more, and you are going to reach an agreement. So that will keep you motivated, hopefully, but one should not lose patience, is what I would like to share.
There's one
That's
more
really
perspective I just wanted to give out here, and that's more about some tactics, not tactical necessarily. One of the techniques we do use, and I've seen used, is you really can also frighten your other side of the problem. You highlight the risks of doing something that you don't want them to do, disturb them basically, right? So in any meeting or a negotiation, and this again, to me, it applies everywhere, whether you're doing it with an individual on some personal basis or a contract or whatever. Can you bring in elements which really makes the other person think, hey, is my position right? What is the risk that I'm going to do? You really disturb the other individual. Now, this may sound like a little negative way of looking at it, but it's really about trying to bring them to your point of view. So maybe the word disturb may be disturbing, but you're really trying to tell them, hey, if you do this, this is where you're going to get hurt. And hey, I've got your best interest at heart, so I'm telling you this. Right? That's how the story flows, right? So you got to excite them with what you're bringing. You got to disturb them with what they are asking you, and that's the game that you ultimately play.
That
So-
reminds me, Sanjay, of one of the shortest, but probably the toughest negotiation that I've had. And this was when I was deployed at London at Citibank. We were deploying an investment banking money market front office software, replacing their 25-year legacy system. This software supported deals worth $1 billion daily globally. And total book value was something like 80 trillion or something. So the day we went live, the software would start okay, but then just freeze over time. So we had to restart the server multiple times. We worked overnight to try to figure out the problem, and the system had worked just fine during all testing and all performance testing, etc. So the next morning, money markets start at 6 a.m. And at 5:50 a.m., we found a setting which was different in production versus test, but the technical teams were not confident that this would resolve the problem. Now we had 5 minutes to go, and every minute literally was millions of dollars, right? So if the server was not up in time, then we would have been in very big trouble. So as the senior most person on site that day, I had to make the decision to restart and had to get the permission to restart. And that's the negotiation I'm talking about. So I will never forget that conversation with our customer that day. So what helped was my reputation built over time, my confidence in our offshore team, and clear communication of the problem, the solution, and the end vision, right? And to your point, the fear, if this is not done, what's going to happen? So I'm happy to report that in the end, we changed the setting, restarted the server in time. It resolved the issue, and we were saved from having failed the largest software deployment in my company's history. We went on to receive the Banker Technology Award for that deployment across 30 branches in Citibank. So that was an amazing experience.
Nice.
No, that's awesome, actually. Just along the lines of what I think Manali, you and Sanjay mentioned, the confidence part, I think, here, maybe taking what Sanjay used, the fear aspect, right? And then flipping it a little bit more and bringing the confidence aspect of it. If you give other side a confidence in their mind that you can deliver, what you have, then that significantly helps in the negotiation, because their confidence is much higher in your ability at that point, because of the previous projects you have executed for them, because of the ongoing relationship you have, or because of the way you are pitching your proposal, whatever the scenario may be. But when you are able to build in that confidence in that conversation, that confidence does two things. That not only weighs in your favor, but that also weighs against your competition's favor if a competition is there. Because the customer is going to then say, okay, I'm getting this, I know what I'm going to get from this. Do I really want to risk it? We had that situation occur with us in 2019 with our company when we were when our customer and we were revisiting the contract, and we played along those lines, and lo and behold, we won another 8-year contract extension. But really, it's that reliability, that confidence, that really plays a significant role.
Yeah, that I can relate very well to it. I still remember one of the first projects I was able to win in General Motors. The question I was asked towards the end of the presentation when we were walking out was, hey, you guys have done a good job. You probably got the best proposal, but can you really do it? This was the exact question, right? And at that point of time, no matter what my doubts were, I'm sure there were doubts at that time. I was able to convey that confidence that you mentioned. So it all worked out in the end. That's good. But I quite like that idea. The ability to build confidence in your statements during the process that you are going through. That, yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about or she's talking about and has the intention to deliver. I think that is what drives the confidence. I think very important point. I agree.
This was probably the most richest part or segment of the whole conversation. I'm pretty sure there are questions that are coming in. I do want to say that made the story almost like there's Chanakya Niti, there is masterful strategists, there is all that goes into play when we want to make something happen. Staying on in the question of culture itself, I do have another, a little segment, which is we've all transitioned from a place where we knew, there are certain sports, there's literature, there is pop culture, etc. What have you been able to sort of, pick from here that helped you while you said, sometimes you have to take people out, sometimes you just have to make small talk, stuff like that. Could you just briefly, either of you just talk about what might be coming in handy to you? I know golf does, so.
Yeah, again, I go back to my experience in Japan, and honestly, it all revolves around food. So I was working with an entirely Japanese team. Fortunately, there are 2 or 3 people there who had spent time in the US, so they were a little exposed to culture. But since I'm the kind who eats anything, everything, and want to explore, they used to actually take me out to places where I would never even peek in. So it's a way of getting to know them, which worked for me. Okay, and I guess every one of us finds out something of this nature. So there were 3 months when I was alone. I didn't cook a single day. Everything was Japanese. There were many places I didn't know what it was that I was trying to consume. But that actually helped build the relationship with the team there. It's just an example, but exactly that's to use your word, pop culture. In this case, it is not pop culture per se.
Food culture.
But that's the way it is. Karaoke was a big thing in Japan. We were a small company. We had a dinner once where the CEO was himself singing. We had no choice. That's probably the first and only time I've ever picked up a mic. But those are the kind of things that, help me in that particular process. It's not necessarily it was a project execution, but a project execution is a negotiation every day. Right?
Fabulous. Yeah.
So that's a perspective.
Thank you, Kaka. Satish, Ajit, Manali, anything that you've used as a trick or a tip?
Yes, yeah, of course. And I mean, I had clients in Ohio, and all of us know rivalry between Michigan and Ohio, particularly Ohio, Michigan. So, and you have to be really cognizant of that. Otherwise, the client is from Ohio State, and you start telling them how great was yesterday's game because you're driving from Michigan to there, and then he will kill you, right? I mean, he will hate you. But one has to understand, what will even go bad, right? In such a best is to avoid, or sometimes it is political conversation. It happens in everywhere, right? It happens in India, it happens here as well. So as far as possible, you don't want to upset the client just because you are one-sided on whichever side, right? And you don't know where the client is, and you don't want to necessarily upset the client because your business has nothing to do with that political thing or the university game, right? So one has to keep track of that, but sometimes it is useful as well. I mean, just a fun part, I got a speeding ticket in Ohio, and all of us curse Ohio police, right? And I used to drive almost every week. And I still showed up in the court, and I said, no, this was just fair. And he said, you came all the way from Michigan to defend your ticket? I said, yeah. So he's saying, are you Wolverine? I said, no. And he said, oh, gentlemen, you just saved $100. Let me go. He was a Ohio State. But and I'm sure he used as a joke, but it was real thing in the courtroom. Everybody started clapping and laughing, so that I was not Wolverine. So that understanding and being cognizant of the culture also plays a big role, in my opinion, because again, like Sanjay said, it's you're dealing with people, right? And they have their own aspects, their own, fantasies or what have you.
That's awesome.
Also, so things like you guys mentioned Japan, China, but Japan and Korea, especially, right, they're very respectful cultures, right? Even if you exchange your visiting cards, or they're giving you yours, you're supposed to receive it both hands and read it carefully. You need to know that, or you're going to offend somebody, right? So those aspects are really, really important.
Yeah, I have a Japanese story too, where we learned that we shouldn't be the ones who are paying, but it's the whatever san, who is really the most senior person. He pays, or he or she pays. Mostly he pays, but yeah, that's awesome. So I know we are at almost the 8 p.m. mark. I want to make sure that we have some space for questions also, but there are two really important ones, and we will probably go through them pretty briefly. Satish and Sanjay, I want to ask you that you have seen a whole span of generation, probably, of work and work culture that's coming in. Two things changed over the last 5 years. One was the pandemic, and not everything was, rainbow and butterfly. Things change on its head of what we understand was the office or the way of working. Would you please share with us, topics of how negotiation really came into being in a different way with the pandemic, with virtual setup, and of course the way you're seeing, let's say, newer, fresher blood coming into the work stream and what might be their ways of negotiations, and vice versa.
Yeah, I will say pandemic was a tough thing, very tough period because we are not, and particularly if you are dealing with a new client, extremely difficult because there is no existing relationship. How do you deal with such a thing, right? Again, Sanjay said you're dealing with people whom you have never met, never seen. And therefore, many times, whoever is the incumbent supplier, he gets to win. I mean, for the most part, because even they are not ready to take any risk. But still, you have to keep, I mean, you can't close your shop and say, okay, I will not work for 2 years, come back after pandemic is over, right? So one has to still continue, but many companies and many people, I'm sure they find ways around it. We, in our own small way, we found some ways around it, and we did something called as remote wine testing, if you may call it that way. And so we had, two managers from client side and two from our side, me and my boss. So we said, okay, I will send 2 bottles to both the client managers. You send 2 bottles. So that made it 4. And we told them that you all are Costco members. So you pick one from Costco of your choice. And we picked one. So it was a 1 hour meeting, obviously went for 1.5 hours. And each one has to share their experience, how they feel about this wine versus that wine. And, so all of us had at least 2 wine bottles in common. So one could say, whatever they felt. And then 2 more bottles, which are completely different. Each one picked up different bottles of his choice. So I think that helped us, bond together. And obviously, over this discussion, it is not just, life, how the life is, but most of the time work comes in anyway. And it was very important and very, unique way of getting to know the other party and then getting to know something bits and tidbits about your projects as well. So that happened by the way, but I think it helped us build that relationship better with the client.
That's really
I think
wonderful.
we did try these kind of techniques as well, but I firmly believe that post-pandemic, there has been a shift. There are many customers I see, and I'm looking at a customer context right now where their teams themselves are scattered. So they don't necessarily encourage in-person meeting. And I think that makes negotiation on both sides tougher.
Yes.
So they may miss something, we may miss something, because a lot of the relationships we spoke about actually don't happen in the conference room when you're doing the presentation, but they happen when you're taking a drink of water, the we talk about water cooler, the coffee machine, things of that nature. And that's where you really get insights. So I think that has made some of this tougher in the last 2 years. If you take it from the employee perspective, obviously pandemic was tough. We all reacted to it. All companies reacted. We started working from home. In the software industry, it went 100% virtual. In the manufacturing, obviously you couldn't do that. So they kind of recovered a little faster. So now we have a tough negotiation with our workforce to bring them back to office. And that's a negotiation, because why should I come to office? I'm in Bangalore. It takes me 2 hours to travel one way. What's the value? The value is there. All of us believe it. And while I'm saying that, I myself don't go to office, though it's 15 minutes away, right? So this is another aspect of thing which pandemic, I think, has changed forever. And it's again negotiation. What is the value in it for you? What is in it for the organization? And that's very. I think that's the other nuance I would definitely put in place there.
I think that's a really important one as you bring it to everyone's attention. I want to get us to the last question so that we can, have a good discussion with our audiences if they have questions. The last one is really for all of you, and I would like to start with Manali. It is to say, could each of you really share some of the key insights you have gained about yourselves as in the last 20, 25 years, 30 years that you have been in places where negotiations are the most important, almost crucial, for the survival of a project, team, or the firm. So what is it that you'd like to share with us as your insights, Manali?
Well, I'm essentially an introvert, right? So for me, the biggest thing is, you need to talk, right? Just speak up, and communication is the biggest learning for me. And like I mentioned earlier, right? Any kind of situation, even if it's tense, your instinct would be, right? I don't want to talk to that person, or I don't want to deal with this. But again, every time you reach out, the outcome's going to be better. So that was the biggest learning for me. And that's what I'm trying to incorporate in my life every day.
Awesome. Thank you. Ajit?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think maintaining the relationship, as Manali said, and I totally agree, having frequent communication, look at the relationship like as a glass half full. When you embody basically this mindset, then you are always keeping the conversation open. You are not giving any indications to the customer that of any animosity, or that you are trying to get one up on them. That's very critical. And that's where it has significantly helped me throughout my that you maintain that relationship, you live up to it, and you always basically are ready to go the extra mile with them. Whether it is, hey, I'm going to deliver something to you, then I need to stand for it. You are going to receive this from me, or whatever, you got to stand for it. When you kind of show that level of commitment towards it, it always works in your benefit. So that's definitely been my motto over the last several years.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ajit. Satish?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier itself, that you need to know a lot about your customer or the other side, and nothing is good enough in my opinion. I mean, you have to it's a continuous exercise, and of course, learning every day. I mean, as we know, the technology is changing so fast that unless you are able to keep up with it, it's very difficult for anybody else, I mean, to carry forward conversation itself, right? And so definitely one has to keep learning and know about the other side more than even the other side knows about themselves. When you reach that position, I think only then you can speak with confidence that I know what you need, right? And like I heard earlier, Steve Jobs used to say that, okay, I don't ask for customer feedback because they don't know. I should tell them what they should be thinking about. Okay, so which is such a different, completely different. I will tell you what you should be thinking, right? So that maybe sometimes it is called arrogance, but I think there is some truth in it, because if you are trying to do good to somebody, that somebody should at least know and value and appreciate that, yes, it is indeed going to be good, right? Only then that person will even trust you or even meet with you. Otherwise, there is no point. So in order to know that, you have to keep learning. I think those two things are very, very important. And I think we'll have to allocate a lot more time, although most of things are at fingertips nowadays, but still you need to spend a lot more time in learning and understanding.
To the same question of learning, Satish, I know you had two books as references that you had shared with
Oh,
us.
yeah.
Would you please? Yeah, thank
So
you.
I had opportunity to attend to one of the seminars, and there is a great, I believe, guru called Chester Karras. You might have seen his advertisements in the flights. Many times in the flight magazines he used to advertise. So I attended it myself. And then he has written two books, one of which is Give and Take. So there he has explained many situations in like 1 or 2 pages per situation. So you can open any page of that book and start reading. It's very interesting, and it will be useful. And other is that it says that you don't get what you reserve, but you get what you negotiate. So very, very profound principle, in my opinion. Very fundamentally, it will change the way you think. That many times, and particularly I've seen Maharashtrians, and they are, "Okay, I will get if I deserve. I will not ask for something." But there's nothing wrong. I mean, otherwise you will keep cursing yourself that I didn't get this, or I should have got that at the back of your mind, you'll keep thinking. So rather than doing that, if you have a chance, and one can always find a chance to negotiate, then you'll get what you negotiate. So those are the two books for anyone interested.
Thank you. That was wonderful. I didn't want you to miss that. And then last but not the least, Sanjay, what would you say that you've learned about yourself in
I think
years
the
of negotiation?
question you asked about yourself is very pertinent because yes, we need to know about customer. Yes, we need to know about their challenges, what they want. But I think we need to know what is my strength and what is my weakness, and how do I exploit my strength, and how do I find something or somebody to be with me to shore up my weaknesses. I think that's the most important thing. I think I resonate a little bit with what Manali said. I'm quite good with the nuts and bolts of a negotiation in terms of the content, but numbers, not my strength. Maybe the softer aspect, not that much my strength. So that is where I feel that, yes, you need to know what you can do good and where you need support. I feel that's important because, as I said, it's a team game at the end of the day. And you're all individuals, you're people trying to bring each other to a common conversion point. So that's, I think, my 2 cents, 2 paise, whatever you want to call it.
Fabulous. I think this was really helpful. This is a journey, and this is something that we experience every day of our working lives, professional and personal lives. I do want to say that I know we went a little over time, but I hope our audience can stay in on a little longer so that we can open this now for their questions. I know questions are coming in. Swati Kaku, do you want to look at what questions we have, and people can go out off the mute and really ask these questions?
So there's someone who wanted to ask a question. Yeah, Bhakti and Ravi.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Hey, that was a terrific session. Kudos to you, Mugdha, the way you conducted that one, and the panelists were amazing. I mean, the kind of information we received, it was like over 20-30 years of experience was trying to grab into a small 1 hour of time, but phenomenal. So I have a simple question, or one question. So I know these negotiation skills are very, very important in our life. The question is, when we deal with a lot of different types of people, because every individual personality is different, everybody's thinking is different, right? So as a person, this is a learning experience. Every day is a learning. How do we make sure that when we are talking to different personalities, what are the certain pointers we can look at, like 3-4 pointers, which we can keep always in mind? I mean, I know there is no certain one solution for everyone, but what are the 3-4 pointers you guys can suggest depending on your experience, which we can really keep in our mind and we can implement it in real time on the field, thinking that, okay, this could be one of the ways, because negotiation might be different for different person. So that is the muscle which how we can build it. What are the 3-4 pointers you guys can suggest?
I'll start if you don't mind. So Satish mentioned the prep work that you have to do, right? So you have to know what you want to start with, but then you have to look for body language, right? Did a certain point resonate, then expand on that, right? So that's something I do personally myself, that, hey, I deliver my pitch, right? But I have to modify my pitch based on audience response. So that's one of my pointers.
Yeah, I think that does make good sense. Body language, yeah, that's where that will give a sense of confidence to other person, how he's looking at you. Great.
Correct.
Great sharing.
Awesome. Thank you, Ravi. Now we have Ulka raising her hand. Ulka, what's your question?
First of all, thank you. This was very, very insightful. I've never negotiated in a true sense from a monetary standpoint, but yes, I can relate to working with teams. My question is, I kept hearing win-win throughout the panel, throughout the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a weightage that you put to either making yourself indispensable versus empowering the other person? I mean, it could be other party, other client. Or do you strike a balance between the two? Because ultimately, we keep hearing we want a win-win, but then do we want them to come back to us, or do we want to empower them? And what would be would
So
you weigh one versus other, or would you really make it 50-50 kind of a balance?
maybe just a perspective on the based on the words you use. So indispensable to somebody is good, but they should not feel it as a threat. And that's where the balance comes in, right? They see that, hey, I'm so dependent on this individual, this organization, this group of people that I should look for an alternative. And I don't think there's a real black and white as to how you do it, but you got to be conscious of, am I coming to a point where somebody say, hey, this is no longer tenable for me? And that's where that win-win piece comes in. It's a little nebulous by its nature because my position can change. And I think that's probably one way of looking at it. Great
But
if you're indispensable, but don't make it so that you become a threat.
yeah,
Correct.
so that's why it is, I think you had a point that you make the other party self-sufficient or something so that they don't have to come back to you for that one thing. But at the same time, and that's the reason I said you have to keep learning, right? So you have to make them empowered. At the same time, they should feel that, okay, this guy's almost given it for free, right? He's made me do the same things, otherwise I have to pay for this. But now he's got something new, right? And that's where technology is changing so fast. So you will get to do this every day only if you are able to learn that every day, right? So the customer should feel like, or the other party should feel like, okay, he has given me, I should stick to him. I better stick to this party or this person so that I get to learn a new idea every day, right? And that's how the long-term relationship happens actually. It's not because it is written in the contract that 5 years, okay, I will be your partner, right? Maybe that is on the paper in the books. But if they don't like you, right, then they will try to see how to get out of it earlier than later, correct? So it is for you to still continue to keep showing them the value so that they stick to you, right? It is possible. I mean, if many people are doing it.
Great. Thank you both.
Thank you, Ulka. We have another question, which is what negotiation skills can you use with your boss who is willing to forego assertion or assertiveness for avoiding conflict? Really important question.
Yeah, but let go for avoiding conflicts, then you win, right?
But then I don't know if, Shraddha,
I
do you
mean,
want to
I didn't-
expand on it a little bit?
Hey, Mugdha, thanks. And hi, thanks everyone. I thought I was putting the question as a guest, but anyway. Yeah, so just to expand, this is something that I'm currently facing in my job. So even when assertiveness is very much required so that you could clarify some technical things, say, use your expertise and prove your value and be useful in the workplace so that you get work done. Even in such situations, because of some personalities who are like over in the workplace for like a long time, and because of their seniority who are not willing to listen to you, if someone's boss is kind of advising that, okay, just don't speak up for avoiding conflict because there's many senior folks above you, it is curbing someone's growth opportunities, right? And then how are you getting work done? What will you show at the end of the year? What work did you get done, right? So, I mean, this is a very unhealthy situation, but I was just like thinking on this for the past 4 weeks. So I thought this is a right forum to ask.
Shraddha, thank you for asking the question. This is so important.
So basically, he's asking you to forego, and not boss is not willing to forego his assertion, right? He will keep his assertion, but he is asking you to let go and keep quiet. Is that right?
No, he will not speak himself because he is not an expert in the area, but he is not allowing myself to speak either. So he's like, just
got it. Now I understand. Yes, it is tough. Again, if anyone wants to answer.
Yeah, I think similar principles will work. Whether we can answer your specific question, I don't know. So he has to be made to feel that if you speak up, he's going to gain something.
exactly.
Or if you don't speak up, he's going to lose something. And those are the two levers which
Yeah.
potentially can help. What are those levers? I don't know. So if you don't speak and the project gets derailed and he takes the blame, that is one scenario.
Right.
So that's an approach. I'm not sure that it exactly answers, but
But
No, but
yeah,
that's
I
a
agree, Sanjay. You do it once and show your boss that there's no harm done, and if anything, there's advantages to doing that, right? This is not something that can be addressed just by discussion or talking it out, right? This is to be done in action, in my opinion.
the other thing I just wanted to add here is maybe this is not a good example for an impromptu conversation. So I think, as Satish said, hey, you have to anticipate the situation, you have to understand the other party. I think if you anticipate when this is going to come up, maybe set up a one-on-one, and then in that one-on-one, as Sanjay suggested, basically have the pros and cons discussion, right? And then basically cultivate some seeds in the mind. And I think then that gives us the opportunity to determine either he or she is gonna speak up, or whether there is opportunity for you to speak up and clarify, right? So I think then you are not risking anything, but you have just cultivated the ground, made it fertile enough that you can have that conversation.
Yes, absolutely. So both your points are very well taken. Thank you so much. So talking to the boss one-on-one and also showing him in action, I believe both of those are extremely valuable. Thank you.
Correct.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shraddha. We have one more question, and I'll just go read this.
I think we have got a couple of questions. One is from Madhura and another one is from MD.
Yeah, I'm just reading Madhura's.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Is there a failure or failed attempt that actually ended up a good lesson for you in the long term from any of your negotiations that you might want to share? And then we have Ruturaj.
I have an example of a failure. It was a pretty big failure for us as a whole. So this was a big manufacturing company in China. They were like the world's largest seafood exporters or something like that. And so, sorry to the sales guys on the call, but our sales team went ahead and promised something that was not possible. And so we were in a bind where we were expected to deliver something which was just humanly impossible, right? So the CEO of this company was one tough cookie, right? So I was sent over to, hey, talk to them, rescope, or at least ask for more costs, right? Get more budget, etc. And so when we went over, this was a Hong Kong, China-based company. This customer was, sorry, you guys signed the contract, right? So you have to deliver. In the end, we spent 2 years building and delivering that software for something that was signed for like a few months, 3 or 4 months. So this was a failed negotiation. What was the follow-up question for that, Mugdha?
Lessons learned.
Lessons learned.
Lessons learned. Sales teams talk to the software teams.
So there are many failed. I'll just share mine. So I was working on a proposal, a program, almost 8 months. And this was, of course, in the US. And there was another service provider, you can say, a very large service provider working with their counterparts in Japan. And actually they had, and obviously because headquarter, the big bosses were all in Japan, so they could finalize that program already in Japan. But I didn't realize that that will have direct impact. Okay, and that we came to know a little later that it was being finalized for another, for Japan, the Asia Pacific area. But that after working hard for so long, it just ruined the whole thing for us. And we were about to get that awarded, and finally we lost. A big deal. So a lot of time spent on that. So it feels bad. But lessons learned again is that you'll have to keep working on that customer, and understanding who the buyers are and who the influencers are. And they may not be in the room, like I mentioned earlier. That was based on that experience, that they may be anywhere. So you need to still find out, and it is not easy. I think I see another question here, that how do you do this in a negotiation meeting? So it doesn't happen. In negotiation, like I said, is a process. It starts from the day you start interacting with somebody, and you use all of that collective intelligence that you gather to meet the final decision. And that may happen over a number of meetings, right? So there is no like a shortcut, I would say, that you find something and just act in that meeting and you are done. It's not never like, at least in my opinion, in my experience, it's never like that.
And
Yeah, so
to
thank you,
think about-
Satish.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I do have to look at the time. There is one more question we'll take, and then we will have to probably, send us the chat. In the chat, I'll send the email where you can send us your questions, and we'll of course summarize this and so on. Sorry, Manali, did you want to make a point quickly, and then I can move to Ruturaj?
No, to Satish's point, he was answering how do you approach understanding other parties' needs and interest in a negotiation, right? So I was just trying to add a point that often we go with our own spiel, right? We know what we want to say, but we don't ask that question. What do you need? What do you want? And that's important to ask that question. That's how you find out, how you start finding out. And then you listen very carefully and ask follow-up questions.
The other point is, I think, having a regular dialogue with the customer actually, allows you to little by little, build up the storyline. And that allows you to understand maybe what the customer is looking for. It may not come out in one conversation, but you can definitely connect the dots.
Thank you, Ajit. We'll move to Ruturaj's question and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, excellent session. खूप छान वाटलं ऐकायला वेगवेगळे थॉट्स आणि टूल्स आणि प्रॅक्टिसेस. एकच मी सजेस्ट करेन की मनाली, यू मेन्शन समथिंग अबाउट डच सायकॉलॉजिस्ट. इट वुड बी ग्रेट इफ यू कॅन पुट इट इन द चॅट, सो आपल्या सगळ्या ऑडियन्सना पण ती माहिती मिळेल इफ दे वॉन्ट टू लुक इट अप. आणि सतीश, इफ आय कॅन रिक्वेस्ट यू टू डू द सेम फॉर द 2 books, amazing books that you referred to. If you can put it in the chat.
I put that in the chat. Are you not able to see?
Okay.
Then
Excellent. I may have missed that, but thank you so much. You already answered my question on how to tap into the influencers that are not in the meeting already. So thank you for answering that. My one question to Sanjay is, Sanjay, you said something about you incentivize your target audiences based on what value you offer, but also at times you scare them by the adversity. Can you elaborate more on that? How would you do that? Sanjay, you're on mute.
Sorry. So we had a case, for example, where this customer had a failed ERP implementation. Okay. And this is a little bit more technical, but let's say there was a version 1 of the software and now version 2 is still coming in the market, not yet got credibility. But it is at a point where it's beginning to take off. And this customer was still, because it had failed on version 1, they still wanted to re-implement version 1 again. So the conversation I had with the CEO and CIO at that time was, why are you implementing a legacy? You're going to spend 3 years implementing version 1. By that time, version 2 is going to be mature and spread in the market. So if you do version 1 today, you are going to implement a legacy system. And already I've heard many times in our conversations that we got a lot of legacy systems. So this is an example of saying that, hey, the action that you're about to take is likely to land you into a bigger problem. You are better off taking a slightly more aggressive approach and taking a different action. So this is an example of what I meant by that. That yes, you have decided on a course of action, but I'm trying to point out to you some of the difficulties involved. So this is an example of that. And we were successfully able to convert their strategy from going with the older version, which rather than go to the new version. So now they are on the current software. So this is something which happened almost 6 years back, but it's an example of what you could do.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay. We could continue for yet another hour, but I know we all have to go back to our negotiated lives. And so I will say that thank you so much for this time this evening, for the rich experiences, insights. Everyone loved to talk about their failures. Did you realize that? Which was amazing. And at the same time, to all our attendees, I know there could be more questions that might be sparking in your head right now. Please send it to us on the Gmail address that's in the chat. I hope you're able to take some of those tangible takeaways, process, and even interpersonal dynamics that come into play as you're creating a winning proposition, not just for yourself, but also for your team. There's more coming in from this group as we're thinking about how can we expand, how can we think about a few more topics. Feel free to share some of your ideas. Raise your hand if you want to, kind of just lead on any of the topics. This is very much collaborative. This is not one brain that hits it all. So we would love for this conversation to continue. Hello Thursdays will happen every month, whether that's going to be meeting in person or hybrid like this. I guess today the weather definitely played its role. And so I'm glad this was in virtual. And having said that, I hope you have a great night. And until next time, thank you so much.
Hey, one question before you go. Is this recording going to be shared?
Yes.
Okay, what's the platform?
Yeah. So, I think we'll provide the links to the recording, probably through the similar channels, whether it was emails or WhatsApp or likewise, that's one mechanism. The other point that I wanted to quickly also add to what Mugdha said. So Garze Marathi, career transformation group, we talk to each other, let's say, through a closed LinkedIn forum that we have. We have a or couple WhatsApp groups, that we walk through. So if anybody is interested, please, let us know. The idea is to grow. And quite honestly, since March, through these different forums, and Hello Thursdays or some of the other things we have planned, we are trying to figure out how can we, help each other, how can we grow. So ideas are welcome.
All right, then, signing us off. And I hope you have a great rest of your night. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.